How on earth did a small, rainy island on the edge of Europe end up shaping so much of the modern world? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're going to dive deep into the waves of migration, invasion, and revolution that hammered out the unique identity of England. Let's get right into it. So, when you think of England's story, you probably picture an island, right? Protected by the sea, kind of separate from everything else. But here's the twist. For most of its history, that's not the case at all. England's destiny wasn't defined by isolation. In fact, it was forged by its constant, chaotic, and often incredibly violent connection to the rest of Europe. And that really is the heart of what we're talking about today. The story of England isn't about one pure, unchanging group of people. It's a story of constant reinvention, a culture built layer by the very people who came to conquer it. It's a story written by invaders.
All right, so let's get started with our first major wave, the Romans. But before we can really get what they did, we need to quickly look at what was there before they showed up. We gotta set the scene.
Okay, so first off, it's wild to think that for thousands of years, Britain wasn't even an island. You could have literally walked there from the continent. But then the Ice Age ended, the sea levels rose, and poof, it's an island. Then comes farming, which is a total game changer, leading to incredible settlements like Stonehenge. And by the time our story really kicks off, a vibrant Celtic culture is thriving there. So that's our starting point. That's the world the Romans are about to walk into. So after Julius Caesar gave it a shot and failed, Emperor Claudius decided to go all in. And for nearly 400 years, think about that, that's longer than the United States has existed, Rome was in charge. And they didn't just conquer, they built. They founded cities like London that are still massive today, and they laid down a road system that literally set the groundwork for the future of the country. But then, the empire back home started to crumble, and in 407 AD, the legions were called back. They just left, leaving behind this massive power vacuum. And you know what they say about a vacuum? History can't stand one. So into that void poured the next, and maybe the most important, wave of people. These were the Germanic tribes who would eventually give the country its name, Angloland, and its language. This is the time of the Anglo-Saxons, and their epic struggle against a brand new threat from the sea. So who were these Anglo-Saxons? Well, they were a collection of Germanic peoples who started showing up around the 4th century. And here's something historians still argue about. Was it a brutal, bloody invasion that just wiped out the people who were there, or was it more of a gradual move, with cultures slowly blending together? Honestly, whatever happened, the end result was the same. Their culture, their customs, and crucially, their language, Old English, completely took over.
But it's super important to realize Anglo-Saxon England was not one big happy country, not even close. It was more like a collection of rival kingdoms all squabbling for power. They called it the Heptarchy, the 7 kingdoms. You had Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, all with their own kings, all fighting each other. And this disunity, it was about to become a very, very big problem.
Because a new terror was coming from the North Sea, the Vikings. At first, their attacks were just quick smash and grabs. They'd hit a rich, poorly defended monastery, take the gold, and leave. But in 865, the game completely changed. A huge force, remembered as the Great Heathen Army, landed. And they weren't there to raid. They were there to conquer. They were there to stay. And man, they were brutally effective. The speed was just stunning. In less than 10 years, the great kingdoms of Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia were all gone, just overrun. It looked like the Anglo-Saxon story was over. The whole idea of England was about to be wiped off the map. Only one, out of all those kingdoms, just one was left standing against the Viking tide, Wessex. And it was led by an incredible king named Alfred. Pushed back to the absolute brink of defeat, hiding in the marshes, he managed to rally his army for one last stand. And he won. He didn't just save Wessex, he saved the idea of England, setting things up so his grandson, Athelstan, could finally unite all the kingdoms and become the first true king of the English. The kingdom Alfred's descendants built lasted for over a century. But then came a single year, a date that every kid in England learns in school, that would change the history of the nation forever. The final and most dramatic invasion was about to hit. 1066. So what happened? Well, the year kicked off with the death of King Edward the Confessor, and he died without a son, without an heir. That created an immediate power vacuum.
The top English nobleman, a guy named Harold Godwinson, gets himself crowned. But across the sea, two other guys believed the throne was theirs. Harold Hardrada, the King of Norway, and Duke William of Normandy. And both of them started getting their armies ready.
So just try to put yourself in King Harold's shoes. It is an absolute strategic nightmare. First, he has to race his army north to fight off the Norwegian invasion, which he does. He wins a huge victory at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. But literally days later, he gets word that William has landed in the south. So his completely exhausted army has to turn right around and force march over 200 miles to face a totally fresh Norman army at Hastings. It was just an impossible situation. And he lost. Harold was killed, and that was that. But this wasn't just a new king taking over. No, this was a revolution, a total reset. The Normans systematically replaced the entire Anglo-Saxon ruling class. All the lords, all the bishops, gone, replaced by French-speaking Normans. The language of power became French. England's focus completely pivoted away from Scandinavia and was now locked onto France. Everything changed.
Okay, so with the age of invasions over, the story of England turns inward. The biggest new conflicts weren't about fighting off foreigners. Now it was about the English fighting themselves over one fundamental question: who gets to have the power?
And for centuries, it was just this constant tug of war. You had English kings who also owned huge chunks of France, so they were always fighting wars over there. The nobles back home got sick of paying for it all, and in 1215, they forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, which was huge. It was the first time it was put in writing that even the king had to follow the rules. Later, you get the first parliament, and even these brutal civil wars, like the Wars of the Roses, between different families fighting for the crown. This whole internal power struggle gets cranked up to a whole new level with the Tudors. It really all comes down to one thing. King Henry VIII wanted a son, and the Pope wouldn't grant him a divorce so he could remarry. So Henry did something that was absolutely unthinkable at the time. He just broke up with the Catholic Church, he started his own church, the Church of England, made himself the boss, and plunged the country into 100 years of bloody religious turmoil. By the 1600s, that central question, who is really in charge here, finally reached its breaking point. On one side, you have King Charles I, who believed in the divine right of kings, that God put him on the throne so he didn't have to answer to anyone. On the other side, you have Parliament, who argued that they represented the nation and held the ultimate power. There was no room for compromise. The only way this could be settled was civil war. And Parliament won. They captured the king and executed him. For a short time, England was actually a republic. Now, the monarchy did eventually come back, but it was never the same. Its power was checked. And through events like the Glorious Revolution and the Bill of Rights, it was made official. Parliament was supreme. Finally, in 1707, the English and Scottish parliaments merged, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain. The modern state had been forged.
So after all of that, all those invasions, all those civil wars, what's the most tangible thing left behind? Well, it's something you're using right this second. The very language we're speaking is like a living museum of this entire crazy history.
This is so cool, and it just brings everything together. The English language is a direct result of every group that washed up on those shores. Your basic everyday words, man, wife, house, love, that's from the Anglo-Saxons. Those tough, sharp-edged words like sky, knife, and hit, pure Viking. And all the fancy formal words for government, law, and food, parliament, justice, beef, that's a direct import from the Norman French. It's all in there, all the different layers.
So, from Celtic tribes and Roman engineers to Anglo-Saxon farmers, Viking warriors, and Norman knights, the identity of England was never a fixed thing. It was always, always a work in progress, forged in conflict and change. And that, of course, raises one last question. In a world that keeps changing faster than ever, what will the next chapter of this island story be?